nonprofit called the Smart Energy Consumer Collaborative. And we produced research in 2019 on rates and rate plans. And I was invited to present that research to the commission in Georgia because they were considering a new rate plan for residential customers for Georgia Power. And one of the rate plans we studied was harmful to customers. It raised their bills. And the staff at the PSC wanted me to present that finding to the commission because that happened to be the rate plan Georgia Power wanted. And I did. And a couple months later, I checked back and learned that the commission approved that rate plan. They completely ignored my research. I had brought another study besides my own. They ignored both of them. And I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. I call that my naive phase because I thought that, I mean, I knew Georgia Power was gonzo for profits, but I didn't know they would target low-income people. And I didn't know the commission would allow it. So that was sort of my get off the couch moment. And when I realized that that was happening, I started looking into everything else that was going on, and it was a disaster for Georgians. So at some point, I decided to leave my position and try to run for office to get rid of what I thought was a bad apple. Turns out the whole system is bad. But my intention in 2021, when I left my job, was to unseat Tim Echols, get on the commission and fix the problems. But as we'll see, they're a little bigger than just one person. So little overview of the agenda. I'm going to talk about the commission. We'll talk about the candidates. What does the PSC do? How that's going for us and how we need to fix the problems. And I did review the questions that were sent to me that some of you submitted. So hopefully I'll cover all of them, but if not, we'll do that during Q&A. So roles and responsibilities for the commission. It is a 5-person elected body. It is fairly unusual for a state to elect its electricity commissioners because it is an unusual role and most states appoint them. 40 states appoint them, only 10 states elect them. And we elect ours. So that responsibility has fallen to us. They determine the rates and profits for Georgia Power, which is a monopoly. They determine the generation mix for Georgia Power. And they also monitor gas. Gas is deregulated in Georgia, so you can pick your gas provider. And there's some telecom, although not much anymore since, you know, we have cell phones. There's some broadband issues in rural Georgia, but the big gorilla in the room is Georgia Power. So that's the one that really affects all of our lives. There are 5 commissioners currently on the commission. These are their pictures and names. And I've circled in red the 2 that are up for election this year, Tim Echols and Fitz Johnson. They're both terrible human beings. I'll just put it out there. They're not good people. And I will show you why in a minute. I'm thrilled that we have an election this year and we can send them home. So I'm going to show you this map. These are the 5 districts for the PSC, and then I'm going to tell you to ignore this map because it has nothing to do with you. Voters vote statewide. It doesn't matter where you live, and it doesn't matter what district is up for election. You can vote for that commissioner. That was the subject of severe litigation. I said fierce litigation by 4 Black plaintiffs. They filed a lawsuit in 2020 that the statewide election for district seats is illegal. It disenfranchises Black voters and violates the Voting Rights Act. And they won that case initially in federal court. I attended a lot of the hearings. They did a great job. They hired voting rights experts, data statisticians, and they proved that had the commissioners been elected by district instead of the state, none of them would have their seats, especially not the Metro Atlanta one. Chuck Eaton, who served for 14 years representing a district that did not want him. But then the state appealed, and they said, and then the appeals, the further up you go in court in Georgia, the more conservative the judges are, kind of similar to our Supreme Court. So they won on the federal court, and then the Court of Appeals overturned it. And I read the ruling. It was ridiculous. Their ruling sounded like a 10th grade essay. It was very low quality. They did not address the issue of race. They did not address the issue of voting rights or disenfranchisement at all. all they said was, well, we don't believe in federalism. Federalism is wrong. And we think the state, and what federalism means is the state gets to decide how they run their elections. And I read that and I thought, you are federal judges paid with federal taxes, ruling on a federal law, the Voting Rights Act, and you don't believe in federalism, you need to resign. There was a 3-judge panel. All 3 of them need to resign. So then the plaintiffs appealed to the Supreme Court, and you know how that went. They didn't take the case. So the election remains statewide. That is the reason for the delay, though. I have a couple of headlines here. The litigation caused 3 years of delay. When I left my position in 2021, it was to launch my campaign in 2022 because a statewide race needs a very long runway to raise enough money. 18 months is what I was told. So that's what I did. And in 2022, the election was canceled due to this litigation. The judges took a very long time to rule, a whole year, even though it was an election and elections are time sensitive. And then they held the ruling, which means they didn't pass it back to the lower court. So the lower court couldn't act on it. Many more months went by. I mean, I can't help but think it's collusion. And so eventually it was released. The Supreme Court didn't take the case. Then just for grins, the legislature added another 2 years. They claim it was to make sure the elections remained staggered. So here we are in 2025, finally having PSC elections. And anyway, we have 8 candidates running, but most of them don't matter to you. I'll show you which ones do. Who are the candidates? So on the left side of this screen are the 2 candidates that you need to know about for District 2, which is Eastern Georgia. Again, the districts don't matter, but I just want you to understand your ballot. The woman at the top is Alicia Johnson. Looks like I made a mistake on her screen grab and didn't get her name. But anyway, she has no opponent in the Democratic primary, so there's nothing for you to do there. On the bottom picture, it's Lee Mums. He is a Republican trying to primary Tim Echols. And I would love for him to win. I would love on June 18th to no longer have to think about Tim Echols. But he's not likely to win. However, I wish he would. So the only way you would not be able to see both of those candidates, you have to pick a party. So if you pick the Democratic Party ballot, you would only see Alicia Johnson. If you pick for District 2, if you pick the Republican ballot, you would only see Lee Mums and Tim Echols. You wouldn't see Alicia. So that's how that works. So not much to do for District 2. For District 3, that is the horse race. There are 4 candidates involved: Peter Hubbard, Robert Jones, Keisha Waits, and Daniel Blackman. And Daniel Blackman, you probably heard, was disqualified, but you may or may not have heard that his candidacy was reinstated by an emergency injunction. The court allows him to remain on the ballot because he appealed his initial disqualification. And the argument is, he has a right to have his appeal heard before, he's off the ballot. So the judge agreed he will remain on the ballot. If you get a Democratic ballot, you will see these 4 names on your ballot. And then just a little bit.
Patty, if I could just interrupt just real quick. Yeah. So later on when we get to question and answer, Jacob and I will be uplifting questions we see in the chat. But in the meantime, if it's okay, we might just briefly interrupt and just ask for additional clarification. That you mentioned that we select party when we get to the primary ballot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Does that mean we select party and we have to make one choice on party, and then we would see both District 2 and District 3?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And for that party.
Maybe you'll kind of get to it, but would there be any wonderings you would have about taking a Republican ballot and voting for Lee Munns if we don't have a strong opinion about who wins the District 3 seats?
Yeah, I think that would be fine with a little bit of nuance I'll get into on the next slide, but I think that's a reasonable position. Yeah. I'll show you the little bit of nuance though.
Great, thanks.
By the way, that's for the primary. For the general, you do not pick party. You pick you just get your ballot, and both parties are on that ballot. It would be at that point, it would be the Republican for District 2 seat versus the Democrat for District 2 seat. And same for the District 3 seat. There would be one candidate of each party for you to pick from. And in the past 20 years, that's where the Democrats have gone down. The Republicans always win these seats, partly because they're statewide. And much of Georgia is very conservative, and they vote Republican, and they don't care about anything else. So that is the very difficult part about this election. But for those of you that are caring about the details of the candidates, let's look at that. So these are, so for just going back to this slide, Keisha Waits does not have any energy experience. So I immediately recommend you throw her out. The Public Service Commission exists to consolidate energy knowledge to benefit the people of Georgia. And she doesn't have any, so I think that disqualifies her. Of course, anybody can run that wants to, but I don't think a candidate with no energy knowledge should be on the commission. So that only leaves the guys, these three guys. All three of them have energy knowledge. All three of them would make excellent commissioners, frankly. But here's the difference. For Peter, he is the only candidate that is active at the Georgia Public Service Commission, and he has been active for 6 years, pretty long time, as an advocate, as a volunteer. And he's running for the same reason I ran, because he is appalled at what he sees going on down there, and he wants to make change. Robert would also be good. He is the only candidate who has actually worked at a state commission, not Georgia. He worked, I forget if it's either California or Oregon, somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. He's very knowledgeable about energy regulation because of that role. And then Daniel, he's not active at the Georgia PSC. He's never worked for a state commission, but he has run a campaign before, and he knows energy also, just not at the state level. He worked for EPA. For those of you that know, he ran before. He got very close. He got within 33,000 votes of winning. But in my opinion, he did not run a great campaign at that time. He's doing better now, but he did not raise enough money to get his name out. And so when voters he made it to a runoff, which is already amazing, with Ralph Warnock, the first Black senator our state has ever elected. And he was on the ballot. It was just Ralph Warnock and Daniel Blackman. And there were enough there were enough voters voting to elect Ralph Warnock, and would have elected Daniel Blackman had they just clicked that second name on the ballot. But they hadn't heard of him. They didn't know what a PSC seat was. So even though we had the voters there, they turned away and didn't vote for him. So that was very frustrating and unfortunate. I hope that does not repeat itself, of course. It really can. It's an unusual circumstance. Those are the differences between the three. I lean a little bit more toward Peter just because he is active, but I think that there's a good case to be made for Daniel since he's run before. And I think Robert would be fine too. Now, a little bit about Daniel. He did get disqualified for his candidacy, for a candidacy challenge. And I think he's going to have a very big hurdle for winning his appeal, because in order to show residency, the state of Georgia has a list of criteria. It appears to me that he did not meet that list. Of course, he has an appeal. He gets to have his day in court, and he gets to try to convince another judge. The first judge did not agree with his evidence. So I think that makes it very difficult for him to win. That's all the editorializing I want to do. I'm not endorsing. So I hope that's clear. I do want to say a couple more things. I did already cover this about Daniel. His candidacy was reinstated. And I want to cover a little bit more about Peter. So this is a couple of screen grabs I got of last Thursday's integrated resource plan. As I said, Peter has been active at the commission. He was giving testimony last Thursday. He created an entire new integrated resource plan that shows that Georgia Power's load growth estimates are false. They're too high, and they're dirty and expensive. And so he spent a lot of time, hundreds of hours, putting together this great alternative, as he calls it. That's something even I could not do. And so there he is testifying. And then this is the commission, and I want you to see the lower right corner, Commissioner Pridemore, the woman, is looking down at something. And what she's looking down at are notes that she is now going to ask Peter Hubbard at the end of his testimony. And it is not about his testimony, what she's about to ask him. So here it is. She then asks him, do you believe that the murder of United Healthcare CEO in cold blood was justified? And he's like, what? No, Commissioner, I don't support murder. Can we stick to the questions for the integrated resource plan? And she said, well, I'm kind of the commissioner. I ask the questions. Are you going to answer my question? Like, what is this crazy lady doing? Where is this coming from? And she was looking down, and a lot of us believe that she was given side blinding questions to ask him from Georgia Power or from Commissioner Fitz-Johnson, the Black man on the far left in the picture. That's the seat that Peter and the others are competing for, is Fitz's seat. And Fitz has never won election, by the way. He was appointed to his seat for being a donor to Governor Kemp. And then, so he says, no, I don't, please stick to the question. And she's like, I'm asking the questions. Then she says, do you own property of an Extinction Rebellion white mask for domestic, like this is so out of this world, inappropriate questions in a formal rate case, on a formal integrated resource plan proceeding, as to be astounding. And I want you to see this man on the bottom right with his back to us that's nearly bald. I'm going to show you who he is next. Here he is. This is Brandon Marzo. He's a lawyer. He works at Troutman Pepper, or Troutman Pepper Sanders, third largest law firm in Georgia. He represents Georgia Power. He's a partner, which means his billable rate is very high. And he has donated a lot of money to Commissioner Pridemore. Look at how much he's donated. $6,000 from his own funds and another $10,000 from his law firm's funds. So you tell me what kind of a hearing that Peter's very big lift IRP got? Nothing. They didn't ask him any questions about his findings, about his work. That was it. She asked him those questions. After that, the chair said, are there any other questions? There were no other questions, and Peter stepped down. He basically wasted all of his time. And this is one of many stories that those of you that read my newsletter would see, because it is so outrageous what goes on down there. It is not to be believed. If you can imagine how we're getting to the question of murder in an energy hearing, it is ridiculous. So that's all I've got on the commissioners, the candidates, and I'm going to move on now, except for the election dates. We are in early voting period. It will end June 13th, Friday the 13th. And then there's the actual primary day on Tuesday, June 17th. And then there's a little bit of risk that Daniel will lose his appeal. In that case, if there's a clear second place, then that person would become the nominee. My fear is there will not be a clear second place, because there are 3 candidates and it's hard for anybody to rise above with that many candidates. And then what? The state of Georgia is going to have another primary, or we've given them an opening to cancel the elections yet again. So that is one of my frustrations right now, is that we have introduced chaos into an election that is already really hard to win, that we desperately need to win. So enough said on that.
Patty, can I ask a follow-up about if, when you say a clear second place, what does that mean?
I've been told 40%, but no one seems to really know. I probably should contact one of my attorneys that I know that sometimes know these things right away, but I've heard it's 40%. I don't see how anybody, of the other votes, once you back out Daniel, they would divide the rest into percentages, and then I've been told it's 40. I don't see how that's possible for anybody.
Okay.
Could you give a little history of Keisha Waits' running for office for us?
All I know is that she served in the state legislature some years ago, like 2017. She resigned to run for Fulton County chair and did not win. And since then, she has tried to get reelected 7 times and has not prevailed in any She's a serial campaigner, which I didn't know existed until I ran myself. And I'm like, oh, people do that. Okay, they just run and run and run until they win something.
She was actually successful getting on the Atlanta City Council and in one of the at-large posts. And then she resigned from that in order to run for clerk of Fulton County because it paid about twice the amount of salary.
Yeah, but she didn't get that.
She did not get the clerk's job, but she did get the city council job. So she was on the city council and decided she didn't want to serve there. She was there for less than a year.
Yeah, I hope she doesn't win. I really do, because I think she would not be what we need. So, I mean,
Nathan
that's my editorializing.
Nathan asked in the chat about the runoff. So, and is that if Blackman were to be taken off the ballot, would there be a runoff if there wasn't a clear second? So if nobody reaches that, whatever that.
I would think so, but this is new territory. It is not clear to me that someone has won a primary and then been disqualified with 3 candidates. I mean, it's easy if there's one, but with 3 other candidates, I don't know that that's been done. There may be Georgia state code about it, but I doubt it.
So is the law different than normal runoffs? Because usually the runoff is with the top 2 candidate vote getters. And if he was disqualified, then it would be the top 2 other candidates that would run in a runoff.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't think there is a lot of different code related to public service commissioners, but I don't think it's different for voting. So maybe you told me something. That'd be great if that's the case. Then we wouldn't have this. I wouldn't have the fear I have that this is going to drag out and hurt our chances to win.
But so I'll look at that. It would be very abnormal to have a runoff like, in question. Usually it's all top 2 candidates.
Yeah, if one of them isn't disqualified, but it makes sense if it is, that the next 2 would be the ones. So I hope that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crystal, Crystal just, and maybe we'll take this, the last question we'll take on this, and then we'll let you keep going, Patty. But Crystal was asking if Blackman does win the general, would it be possible to have the Georgia GOP disqualify him and leave a hole on the commission afterward? Like, could there be a retroactive removal of if the?
No, I don't see that, because this decision will be made too soon for him to win the general and then be disqualified. The court hearing is June 10th. I believe the judge will rule fairly quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, it wouldn't happen after November.
Great.
Okay. So then I want to make sure that you all are up to date on the news. And there was an announcement made on May 19th that Georgia Power has reached an agreement with the commission to freeze rates for 3 years, which sounds pretty good, right? We've endured a lot of rate increases in the last 2 years, 6 of them to be exact. One of them, the largest in state history, that one for Plant Vogtle. And the other one, the second largest in state history, for the fuel cost surcharge related to the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, which created an enormous spike in gas prices that Georgia Power paid for because they burn gas to generate electricity. And billions of dollars were spent on that gas price spike that we have to reimburse them. So that happened in May of 2023. And Vogtle happened in May of 2024. And then there were more besides. So I was actually looking forward to seeing how incumbents manage a rate case proceeding in the billions, which they always are in Georgia, this fall, while trying to win votes. And that fun has been snatched away, because now that won't happen. But in fact, it's a Trojan horse. This, of course, Georgia Power does not do anything that doesn't profit them. It is all about profits. And so what the 3-year rate freeze does is it entrenches a return on equity of it's the average for the utility industry is 9.57%, which returns a healthy profit for them. Many people think that is too high, but Georgia Power's return on equity is 11.9, basically 12%, an astounding off the charts number that was first delivered to them in 2019 by the commission to mitigate stock and bond punishment for their failure to deliver Plant Vogtle on time or on budget. And there was a lot of risk involved, as you may remember, because it was billions over budget. There was no completion date on the horizon. And Wall Street was like, you're going to lose your credit rating and you're stuck, So the commission heard that and raised the return on equity that's so high, it delivers $700 million a year in excess profits between what a utility with their same sales would earn. The other one is it shields billions of dollars. The grid is, Georgia Power is expanding the grid. I hesitate saying their grid because it's our grid. We pay for it, not them. But so I just say the grid, by massive amounts of gas and a little bit of solar, but mostly gas. And then this proceeding, they have asked for the coal plants to not be retired, canceling all retirements. That coal plants are very expensive. The reason they're retiring everywhere, not only for climate change, because a lot of states don't have climate change goals, and we don't have a federal goal either. They're retiring because they're not competitive. They're really expensive. Same here. That's why they're being retired in Georgia. But now Georgia Power's like, oh, we need the energy, data centers, it's a crisis. There's not a climate crisis in their mind, but there is a data center crisis. And so by not having a rate case, which normally occurs the fall after a spring integrated resource plan, that means that we do not have public scrutiny into how much all this gas and this coal is costing. And not only do we not have scrutiny, we can't shape it. And by the time the 3-year rate freeze is over and 3 years have gone by, it's too late to shape it. And the money's been spent because this rate freeze does not freeze the spending. It is continuing apace. So this is a disaster in my mind. I'm about to blow my stack over the risk and the horror of them doing this to us. And the last one I've already covered with you is it's a gift to the incumbents. They don't have to run during a rate case. So here's a picture on the right. I want you to see that Commissioner Shaw, the chairman, the man in the middle, and the one on the left is McDonald, at Governor Kemp's celebratory press conference and speaking in support of the rate freeze. It's such a good thing. People need rate relief. Now they don't have to worry about another rate increase. Are you kidding me? The fact is they violated their own rules. Here, I've got a copy of it for you to see. Just look at the highlights. Every member of the commission must reserve their opinion and no way commit. Because commissioners are like judges. This is a quasi-judicial body. Imagine a judge saying, man, I can't wait for that car crash DUI driver to get my court. I'm going to send him away. Like, there's no court where a judge may speak publicly about cases before them. And it is the case for the commission too. They're supposed to be neutral parties because there are two sides to every proceeding, Georgia Power side and the public interest. Well, they've already shown their hand. They're all in on Georgia Power side. And so I will be with a coalition of groups, 4 of us will be submitting a letter Friday morning to the commission demanding these commissioners recuse themselves from any voting or further discussions on this rate freeze. I don't expect it to work, but we will be doing a lot of public awareness. I'll be sending it to the media. Hopefully there'll be some news on it because I want everyone to see and know the abuse. It's similar to, like, we haven't figured out our messaging yet, but when Trump was elected, eggs were many places were $10 a carton and people were furious and they voted for lower egg prices, as the saying is. Well, what Georgia Power has done is the equivalent of locking in, of course, egg prices have dropped now. They've locked in the price of $10 a carton and said, oh, it's good for you. Now prices won't go up anymore. This $10 is so good. No worries. That is an inappropriate price then, and it's inappropriate now. And that's what they're doing with their rates. So that's that. Now I wanted you to, happy to answer questions during Q&A. So other than that, how they've been doing, their outrageous power bills. I don't know how many of you have experienced them, but no one can count all the internet, but I counted over 10,000 posts last summer when the first summer bills came in after Plant Vogtle hit. And there is a lot of pain out there. Power disconnects for inability to pay. 8% of their customer base, 20,000 people every month. Last year, it was 200,000 disconnects. And that is the highest in the nation. So whether or not your bill is high, you can believe that it is too high for many people. They prioritize dirty, expensive energy. Plant Vogtle was the most expensive power plant ever built on Earth. They could give two flips about climate change. I already covered the highest shutoff rate. I've always wanted to put their $2.5 billion profit from last year. And before that, it was 2.2. And before that, it was 2. Like, I've always wanted to put that in context with how does that compare to other utilities? Is that a lot? Like, are the utilities doing what Georgia Power is? It's actually the highest of any profits of any utility of their size, which is 2 million or more. So just looking at a few headlines, a quick Georgia Power's in the top 5 states for highest utility costs. I don't know how we're not number 1 or 2 now. This was before Plant Vogtle. You can see some of the coverage the news has covered, how high Georgia Power's bills are. And this really undercuts the claim that commissioners make that they raise rates because Georgia Power must invest in the grid. Yeah, they must invest in the grid. Must they also get $2.5 billion in profits for delivering a commodity with captive customers that they don't even have to recruit with a guaranteed profit? Give me a break. That's ridiculous. Here's a graphic the Atlanta Journal did of all the rate increases. I just circled the year since these rate increases have happened. And you can see the $43 at the top. That's an average for summer and winter bills. For just summer, which is when people struggle because the bills are so high because of heat, it's a $60 a month increase, which is insane. No other state would ever do this to their people. Most states wring their hands over a $5 a month increase because a lot of people are on the edge, and utility bill affordability is of critical importance. You can't remain in your home if you're disconnected. And this is a report that shows that Georgia Power's shutoff rate's the highest in the nation. And this lady, this woman, Shay Schrader, the reporter for WTOC, which is a TV station in Savannah, I really like her style. She really slayed on this. I circled the part where she was like, Georgia Power made a staggering $2.5 billion. I love that. She did a full 4-minute package where she interviewed Commissioner Eccles. She downloaded his donations and showed that he took a ton of money from Georgia Power's lawyers. And then she said it, asked him outright, do you think it's appropriate for you to regulate a utility where you're taking money from their supporters and lawyers? It was so great. I'm in love with her a little bit. Here's a graphic I made.
What was it? What was his answer?
It was, well, it was a lie. I'll just tell you. Well, when I first got on the commission, I took money from solar companies and battery companies, and I was criticized for that. So I just realized that I'm going to be criticized no matter what I do. I'm like, no, first of all, when you got on the commission in 2010, there probably was no battery companies and barely any solar. And who's going to criticize you for that? That's a lie. I know it's a lie. And second of all, solar and battery companies aren't regulated. It's a competitive market. So it's completely different. But that was his answer. So for FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, I was able to get their data from an ally of mine. And that he helped me figure out how to compare Georgia Power. We just took the 11 largest utilities, and you can see in 2024, they made more profits per customer than the next 10 utilities of their category. And not by a little, a lot. If you look at between Florida Power and Light and Georgia Power, it is a big difference. And we did it for 10 years, and it's the same. Georgia Power was number 1 for the last 10 years. That's how abused we are. And then they're meeting the moment with dirty fossil fuel energy, even though Georgia is a top 10 sunny state and could easily meet this growth with solar and battery storage. There's been a lot of media, both national and state, about why Georgia Power is pushing gas so hard. But I'll tell you why. It's because in 2016, Southern Company purchased AGL Services, Atlanta Gas Light. And Atlanta Gas Light sounds like it's an Atlanta-based company. It's not. It's the largest wholesale distributor for gas in the state. Well, not large, it's the only for gas in Georgia. So they are building their gas portfolio off the backs of Georgians because it is where they get their profits. They don't get as much profits from solar. So that's what's going on. This company really needs to be dismantled. And then Plant Vogtle is an absolute fiasco, scandal, the most expensive power plant ever built on Earth at $36 billion, which is absolutely nuts. And for those of you that know, Plant Vogtle was completed in May of 2024. There was so much self-congratulations. Oh, we did something no other state has done. We put the United States is back in the nuclear technology leadership. And I'm like, leadership? Unless people want to be led off a cliff. And then since then, an entire year has gone by. There has not been a single state to follow in our footsteps. We supposedly have trained all these craft workmen. That's what they say. We've finished the design. Oh, the Westinghouse design wasn't finished. Well, it's finished. The workmen are trained. The supply chain is built. Where are all the customers? I'll tell you where. They're choosing affordable solutions, and that's not nuclear. This is what they said, and you can see the date on the bottom left, 2016. As recently as 2016, literally the year before Westinghouse went bankrupt from costs, so they knew they were way over budget by 2016. Here they are still lying. Oh, it's going to put downward pressure on rates. There's no such thing as downward pressure on rates. And it's going to be 2 to 2.5%. Here's what they actually did. 10 times that amount of rate increases. And if you know anything about energy, this was a giant rate increase for 1,000 megawatts. 1,000 megawatts is nothing. This should have been a 2% increase for 1,000 megawatts. That's why no states are doing this. No state would do this to their people. And then for climate change, back to the gas. Tim Echols is now telling people that he is a clean energy advocate, but I want you to see the headlines of the essays he wrote, because he thinks that nobody remembers or sees them, but this is his viewpoint. We don't need the Green New Deal. We don't need the Clean Power Plan. We need to exit the Paris Climate Accords. And of course, he endorsed Trump, who said climate change is a Chinese hoax. Let's see here. Georgia Power uses their political power to block commercial rooftop solar. This is a deep dive that the Current did on why is it that warehouses, if you take off in an airplane, you look down out your window as you're taking off from Georgia, Atlanta, you'll see all these really flat commercial solar roofs that should have solar on them, powering those businesses, but do not. Why not? According to this report, it's because Georgia Power has priced the energy to these large businesses so cheap that the numbers don't pencil out, and a business is not going to put solar on the roof if it costs them more than what Georgia Power charges. Same with residential solar. You can see here there was a big battle in 2022 to expand net metering so that residential rooftop solar could receive some support from the state of Georgia or from Georgia Power. However you want to look at it, it needs a little bit of support because the cost to install the panels is usually a 15-year payback, and people need to be in their home long enough to get the payback. With net metering, which 33 states have, it's not like we're breaking new ground here. All net metering does is require the utility to reimburse the customer retail rates, the same rate that the utility charges for energy, they must reimburse for energy put back on the grid by that customer. And that's a bridge too far for Georgia Power. So they blocked it and we lost this campaign, and you can see Mayor Dickens' reaction. Georgia is in 43rd place for rooftop solar nationally because of Georgia Power. That's an absolute scandal. We are a top 10 sunny state. We have more solar than 40 other states, yet we're almost in the bottom. And Alabama Power and Mississippi Power, also very southern states, also, they're too low to even rank. And what do they have in common? Southern Company is what they have in common. Same with community solar, which really community solar is what is used to help low-income communities or multifamily housing where you can't put solar on a roof. You have community solar, you buy blocks of it, it powers, the grid and you get a discount. We can't have that either. The only solar Georgia Power allows is industrial scale solar that they profit from. And of course, we have a huge climate crisis underway, whether Georgia Power admits it or not. Of course, Georgia Power is not a sentient human. It is a for-profit corporation. So that's where the people need to come in. And, 2024 was the warmest year on record. And the first 5 months of 2025 have been warmer than 2024. So what do we need to do? We need more citizen participation at the commission and with voting. So I'm really happy to speak with you tonight. I hope that you will share this information. Anybody you ask, as you're talking to people over the next 5 months, ask them, have they heard of the PSC? Have they heard of the Georgia Public Service Commission? 90% of the chances they're going to say no. And that's my assignment for you tonight. Educate them and tell them they need to vote and what the commission does. Even if they're an EMC member, I have created a flyer on electric membership corporations members and why they should still vote even though they're not a Georgia Power customer. So I'll get that flyer to Jacob and Paul and then they can get it to you, or you can email me directly. But citizen participation at the commission and with voting. And then we really need state law changes. As I said at the beginning, I initially thought it was one bad apple, but it turns out the whole commission is corrupted by money coming in from Georgia Power and their power, the political power. So I've been working since last summer at the legislature with a lobbyist from Georgia Wand, and she and I were able to get these 3 bills introduced, which was beyond my wildest expectation. We met only with Republican legislators. I did my little dog and pony show with them on how bad Georgia Power is and asked for legislation, and we got these pieces written and dropped, which is astounding. Rename the Public Service Commission to Public Utility. If people are supposed to vote for these seats, help them out. Very logical. They know in 2 seconds what it does then. Establish a Consumer Utility Council, which is an independent advocate at the commission. That was defunded in 2008 during the Great Recession and never restored despite our $1 billion budget surpluses. And then data center funding bill, which would have made them pay for their own cost of generation. All 3 of them were introduced. All 3 of them failed, unfortunately, by leadership. There are many legislators who are allies of our cause and who hate Georgia Power, which was fun to discover during my meetings. But we have a problem with Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones and with Senator Matt Brass and House Speaker John Burns. We have to go after them, and I am going after them. Another couple laws, the Georgia Homegrown Solar Act should have passed, but again, it was a chance. And they used, the legislators that are supporting expanding solar put homegrown in the name to try to show the fact that gas is shipped in. It is not a Georgia asset. Coal is shipped in. What is a Georgia asset? Solar. It's homegrown. It still didn't pass because we have a problem with Georgia Power at the commission, at the legislature, frankly. So we need a law that says they cannot donate. Or what I'm doing is exposing the donations. So if you follow me on social media, you'll see a lot of that kind of stuff from me there. This is unacceptable. This is a photo of the commissioners receiving money from each of the 3. The 2 men and the woman sitting at that table are Georgia Power lawyers. They don't work for Georgia Power. They work for Troutman Pepper, and they give thousands of dollars to each commissioner. And you can see in the white below the photo, those are their personal funds. Below the photo are funds from their law firm. There's literally no way we can get fair regulation from this commission with this going on. This has to be made illegal. And failing that, we can also toss them out. That's the other big way to get reform, is to get rid of them. So I've been sharing this everywhere. If you are on 1 minute on social media and you're following me, you will see this graphic. It is very compelling. And the other big one is this one. None of the commissioners are Georgia Power customers. They all pay their bills to EMCs. So the little slogan I like to say is, they vote to raise our rates, not theirs. They're not impacted. They don't go home to family members, relatives, church, neighbors, grocery store, clubs. There's nobody they're getting feedback from because they're in territories that are not Georgia Power territories. And this is by design. This is not a mistake. And so I think that's all I have. Oh, I do have this last slide. We need new commissioners.
On that, can you go back the previous slide?
Yeah.
Is there any relevant history that we should know about how those EMCs were established, or like how Georgia Power got the particular territories it has today?
Well, EMCs were established nationally as part of the Rural Electrification Project. It did originate in Georgia because FDR, I think he had polio, right, was paralyzed. And he came to, at the time when he was in office, it was thought that hot springs would help and bring back movement. So he traveled from DC to, I guess it's called Hot Springs, Georgia. I'm not sure, Warm Springs maybe. And there's like a little White House there where he used to stay.
It's Warm Springs.
Warm Springs.
Yeah.
And of course that we now know that does not affect polio at all, but in his drive down, he was looking around Georgia and realizing there were all these places that had no electricity. It was like a third world country because the utilities like Georgia Power wouldn't, there's hardly anybody living in rural Georgia, so there's no way to make money. They have to put out these expensive power lines for long distances for like one person. So they just didn't do it. So the federal government took that on to close that gap and created electric membership corporations, which are nonprofits. They provided the funding, and EMCs put in power in all of rural Georgia and all other rural parts of the country.
Well, they built the dams too. They built the dams to provide.
Whatever they did, they did a lot. They basically built the grid with federal subsidies. And so they've retained those, even though Cobb, for example, Cobb County is very much not rural, but the EMC remains, and that's true. Georgia Power has about 60 to 70% of the residential business in the state. The vast majority of it, but not fully. And then these people, the game they play is the commissioners resign between elections intentionally to allow the governor to appoint a successor. And they either have a list or they quick make a list of who's a donor and who does not have a Georgia Power bill. I think, of course I can't know. The last one that happened was Commissioner Fitz-Johnson. He was appointed. And this was an all-white commission at the time that litigation was filed that I showed you. And the state of Georgia would not do well in a case claiming racism with an all-white commission. So they're like, well, we have to quick draw McGraw, get rid of one of these whiteys and appoint a black person. So who's it going to be? So Chuck Eaton had earned a law degree in night school, never served a day as a lawyer. He resigned, and the governor appointed him to be a judge in Fulton Superior Court. Talk about unqualified. And then he put an unqualified man in his place, Fitz-Johnson. So now we can say we have diversity on the commission. None of these 5 brought any energy experience to the commission. That is really disrespectful to the people of Georgia. I think we need to hold the governor accountable for that level of disrespect. So I hope that answers the question. So that's all. I did want to just show you. So Commissioner Johnson is a real estate agent. That's his knowledge that he brought to the commission. Just since his appointment in 2021, he has voted in lockstep with everyone else. He never seen a rate increase he didn't love or a fossil fuel he didn't love. And he has voted for all of these rate cases, all these rate hikes, $24 billion. That's why I say these seats are the most important seats short of governor. The amount of money and power that these commissioners have is off the charts. It is so many billions of dollars. That's unbelievable. I think that's all I have. Yeah. So I'm happy to take questions. I mean, we've already had good Q&A, but I'm happy to have.
Yeah. We have on the calendar invite for this from 5 to 6:30. So I think at this point we'll take questions that are in the chat. I appreciate all of the context that you've given us so far, Patty. And one other thing, if you could share how people should sign up for your newsletter.
Oh yeah, thank you. Just go to my website, georgiansforaffordableenergy.org. And if you scroll to the bottom, there is a place to sign up for the newsletter. And I will, maybe you can hear, I try to tone it down a little bit, but I'm very angry about all this. And so I get a lot of my anger out in my newsletter where I really throw down, like I name names, I put thought bubbles above people's head where I pretend that I know what they're thinking, which I will do for Commissioner Pridemore, which you saw a little bit of. I actually quoted her earlier, but I will change those quotes to be something snarky because these people do not get enough shame and outrage directed at them. So I'm working on that with some partners, and hopefully we will be successful this summer on more. There's already been some small successes, like the Atlanta Journal had a front page article last week that said none of the commissioners are Georgia Power customers. And I'm like, that's me, that's all me. I'll take that's a win. And yeah, so little things like that. But anyway, yeah, please sign up for my newsletter. I'd love to have more subscribers.
Are there some residency issues related to any of the other commissioners, like Fritz Johnson? Doesn't he really live in Cobb County and
yes,
not in his district?
He does, and there's an ally of mine who I believe is going to file a residency challenge for him. They said they were back in February. I don't know if they've changed. I need to check in on that, but I think they're going to wait till it gets closer when might be harder for him to respond to. I don't know exactly the thinking on the timing, but yeah, he's got his home, his family in Cobb County. He is not, he has a 1-bedroom apartment in Fulton County where he is not staying, in my opinion. And
well,
yeah,
that makes him very vulnerable, because if they're gonna throw out Blackman on a residency, he's got a residency issue.
Well, it depends on how, like, I think Daniel Blackman was a little sloppy. I don't know where is Fitz Johnson's driver's license address? Where did he register to vote? Is he getting bills? He has to be getting bills at his apartment, like things like that. But I do know he is still selling real estate. He still is active in his church in Cobb County, and he's still active in, I think, the Chamber of Commerce for Cobb County. Those are things I have verified. So I don't know how he can claim he's a Fulton County resident when he is active in Cobb County. We will see what happens with that.
So Patty, this was great. This is Nan Orrock, and
yeah, hi Nan.
Yeah, just terrific information.
Thank you.
That's not, I mean, you are just a guru on this. Well, you are a statewide treasure, not a national treasure.
Thank you.
I have heard, and I don't know if you can verify this, but it's been my information that Georgia Power gives the data centers a highly attractive package.
Yeah.
When they come here, which accounts for this massive proliferation of data centers in Georgia, that now localities like Atlanta City Council just did this the other day, are trying to put in place restrictions on data center proliferation in urban areas. But I found that fascinating. I mean, they leave no stone unturned.
They don't.
They penetrate. They have paid staff everywhere in every county, and they are influential positions, influencing the legislators that live in those counties to be Georgia Power friendly.
Yeah, it's a big problem. It's a mafia, in my opinion. I do have a chart showing the rate difference between commercial, residential, and what we call CNI, or industrial customers. Commercial, it's called CNI for the big large load, as they call them. And Georgia's large load customers rates are 50% below the national average.
Right, they protect them, but
to the state tax break. No wonder they're flocking here. They'd be fools not to.
Exactly, and they protect and sugarcoat, candy coat, whatever you want to say, for the heavy commercial users, those industrial users, because they have lobbying capacity at the Capitol. And when they first were putting out the Plant Vogel plan, they had commercial ratepayers and residential ratepayers all going to have to pay this added fee to do the financing, and so we were all together opposing it, and then they cut them out. Didn't apply it to them and just left the residential stuck with the whole thing, because they knew the residential is an unorganized entity, you know, just individuals all over the state, as opposed to somebody with a capacity to have a heavy duty lobbying firm at the Capitol. So it goes on and on. I mean, you can tell Georgia Power horror stories till the cows come home, and you'll never get to the end of the list of horror stories about the way that they deform the process.
Just to give
and those
the
other
audience...
people that are sitting on that.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that those other three people that are sitting on Pride Moore and Bubba McDonnell and Jay Shaw are all big Republican operatives. Bubba used to head the Appropriations Committee when he served in the House, and Jay Shaw's daddy was in the House, and then Jay took his seat. And you know, these are all people that know how to play the power game with their big GOP opportunists. So that's what we're left with. You know, total puppets on that commission.
Yeah. Well, just to give people a little bit of hope.
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Yeah. Besides the fact that elections this year, for the first time, the commission is top of the ticket, which has never happened before and may never happen again. So there's a ton of attention, including a New York Times article that's coming out next week, where he came to Georgia, the reporter, and spent 7 days here, which is a tremendous investment for the Times to make. And he interviewed me. He interviewed a lot of people, some of the candidates, Commissioner Eccles, Bobby Baker, others. And I think his story is going to really highlight what's happening in Georgia, our backwater politics, our good old boy, and embarrass the hell out of the state. So I'm hopeful about that.
Amen.
Secondly, you know, there has been this House Resources Committee hearing that has happened last week, I believe it was. It might have been 2 weeks ago. I didn't know about it. Apparently it was organized after the session ended. And what I've heard is that they're hearing and feeling a lot of blowback about data centers in the state, and they're scared. And I believe that they're scared, not only because of that committee, but also because of Pride Moore's attack on Peter Hubbard, and because of the rate freeze. And there's all these signals that they know they're on thin ice and they're about to fall through. That's what I think.
Well, New York is huge. Huge. That's national. You know, it's huge for what you've done to make that happen.
Patty, go over what you think.
And we have allies in the legislature.
Patty, go over what you think
ahead,
our group should do here to affect this election.
Yeah. So the first assignment is to make sure you're talking and reaching everybody in your world. When I count up all the people that I can reach, my neighbors, my clubs, my friends, my family, you know, my interactions with the people just are casual that I know, it is a lot more than you would guess. So that's job number one. Of course, job number two is to vote. And then job number three, this is, I don't know if this is a formal organization, but it would be to join one of the many civic groups that are trying to organize support for the candidates. If you have financial capacity and you have a favorite candidate and $250 will not bother you, please donate that amount to your favorite candidate, because they need desperate money. There's a lot of money flowing to the incumbents from Georgia Power, but we don't need that much money. They just need like a couple $100,000. And that would enable them to advertise, because the statewide race means that they can't do field, they can't knock on doors, they can't walk in parades. There's not a big enough reach. They have to do digital ads. They have to take out ads to reach voters, to know their names. That's part of what Daniel did wrong, in my opinion. He didn't raise enough money to reach voters. So when they stood there voting for Ralph Warnock, they just turned and walked away because they never heard of that guy. So give him 250.
Raphael Warnock.
Raphael. Okay, sorry, I distracted. I know how to say it. I don't know why I said it that way. Yes, and then join a group, give money, basic civic activism. Go to the commission. If you sign up for my newsletter, I will do call to actions, not very often because I don't want to overdo it. When I do a call, I want people to respond. Do those. So those are the main ways. Give money, sign up for my newsletter, join a civic group. If you need a list of them, there's several around where you are. I can get that to Paul and Jacob, and you can get that too. But things like Necessary Trouble, there's many groups like them.
Patty, I'll start giving you some questions that are popping up in the chat. We had Jareem ask, in a perfect world, let's say we have a PSC that is majority Democratic. What's one of the very first changes they could make to benefit Georgians? And then I'll add a tweak to that. Is something I'm curious about is, if we flip 2 seats, what does it mean for policy to have 2 seats flip on a 5-person board?
Yeah. So for the first question, the 2 biggest changes that they could immediately affect would be to lower that return on equity to 9.5%. Bring to earth their profits. That would immediately lower our bills. We don't even need to have a rate cut or any of the other complicated stuff. Just the return on equity would lower the bills. And so that's job 1. Job 2 is to have net metering so that people can put on rooftop solar and, commercial solar. The punitive fees that Georgia Power has that keeps businesses from having commercial solar that would want it needs to be rolled back or eliminated. Those are 2 very easy policies that an all Democratic commission could pass. And then, of course, there's energy efficiency requirements that we invest. I think we get a grade D in energy efficiency. And for every $1 invested, it returns $3 in value. That should be immediately done. There's more, but I'll stop there. In terms of the second question, we only need to flip 1 seat, frankly, because, and I had to answer this question myself when I ran, which is it, if I can't make any change and I'm going to be 1 of 4, I got better things to do with my time. I'm not Donna Quixote here. But the answer is, even 1 person on the commission that's a progressive would make such a huge difference. It would be a shot across the bow, because for 20 years, every Democrat has been shut out. It will be a shot across the bow because that person will be in the room where it happens, kind of like that line in Hamilton. And that person can say, if you don't do this, I'm going to the press. And unlike me, the press doesn't care what I say, but a commissioner would has a statewide bullhorn, and they would have tremendous power in negotiations. And B, the other big thing is, these commissioners express disdain for public comment. They don't have any sessions on the weekends or evenings. They don't go to Savannah or Valdosta. You get your butt down there on Tuesday morning at 9:30 or you're not heard. So the progressive commissioner could make those kind of changes pretty easily by having, because 1 commissioner can make a big difference and can drive changes like that even without having a majority vote. But 1 seat, that's all we need.
Thanks. Crystal asked, which candidates have raised enough money to reasonably expect to get elected?
I don't think any of them have, but their filing deadline was yesterday, or maybe today's the 4th. I forget. They get a 5-day grace, so it might be tomorrow. We will learn the next week probably, or maybe even this week, how much they've raised, but it's not clear to me any of them are doing that well. Maybe Keisha, because she knows how to campaign, which would be unfortunate. If she does well, that would be why.
Are they legally?
I don't know.
Are they legally allowed to give funds to the other after the primary's over?
I can't really hear. Sorry.
Are they legally allowed to give campaign contributions out of the funds they've raised after the primary's over?
Yes, they are.
Choose to do so.
Yep. You can give your money to other candidates. You can give your money to a nonprofit. Or you can refund your money. Those are kind of the 3 choices.
Anna asked, what about introducing legislation to stop the grift payments?
Well, that's what I was talking about with these other slides. We have done, so these pieces do not stop the grift. To her question, this kind of grift. We had a list of 5 pieces of legislation that we shopped to our legislators that we met with over the summer, from easy to hard. The easy one was change the name. And then there were 2 mediums and then 2 hards. And the hardest one was to change how Georgia Power is compensated. So they're not compensated just for spending. They have to meet performance metrics like a regular business. That one's the hardest, kind of like the nuclear option. And then the next to the hardest was stopping the grift. Close this loophole so that right now the law says that regulated entities cannot donate to commissioners, but employees of regulated entities can donate. So can their contractors and consultants and lawyers. So there's all this grift. That needs to change so that I guess we came up with, actually, I discussed this with legislators and they helped even come up with this one, which is that no entity, person or business may donate any funds to the commission if they have business before the commission. Is that too far a bridge? Okay, then put a time frame on it. Business before the commission for 5 years. So that all these lawyers and consultants and regulated employees can't give. All we need is that simple additional sentence to the prohibition to donate from regulated entities, and this would stop. So that's still on the list for next year.
We know that, I'll go to Santini's question next. Santini asked, how should we approach the primary since we have to choose for either a Democratic or Republican ballot? And I think specifically it'd be interesting to hear more about the Republican primary challenger to Eccles.
Yeah, Lee Mums. Yeah, I'll go to him. So Lee knows a little bit about energy. I like him just because he's trying to primary Eccles, but I think he'd be better than Eccles by a long shot, but he is not that strong on energy. His experience is that he worked on Vogel as a welder or something like that. And then he said, when I believe in nuclear, of course, we have to get the cost under control. Well, that's an oxymoron. If costs could be controlled, they would have been. They cannot be. So therefore you can't do it. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Vogel's done. And it's just a talking point, I guess he has. There has a little bit of scandal in his background. Someone sent me with a kerfluffle he had with his wife that turned physical, and then the police were called and blah, blah. I don't know how to think about that. Maybe that's in the past. Maybe it's an unfair charge, but it is a documented issue for him. I'm not talking rumor. It is actually verifiable. But he seems good in terms of an interest in the public good. And I think he'd be fine. If it would be my dream to wake up on June 18th to Tim Eccles being out of a job in November. That would be my dream. But if it is Lee Mums against Alicia Johnson, I would want Alicia to win. But for the primary, if you're thinking, should I vote Republican and help him win? I think that's a fine idea.
What is Alicia's doctorate in? She's a doctor. Do you know what that's in?
I know it's in health, some kind of public health. She has devoted her career to public advocacy and health, and understands the connection between public health and energy, which there is a huge one. We have, Atlanta was graded an F by the American Lung Association for dirty energy. Of course, coal emits particulate matter, so it increases heart attacks and lung disease and asthma. And then doesn't even begin to address climate change and the millions of people that will affect. And I don't know if I said this yet or not, but Georgia's leading the nation in fossil fuel expansion. It is absolutely shameful. And I would love to get more media on this. That's one of the things on my list to do, is figure out how to get more media. A lot of the media don't like to write things like that because they can't verify. Like they'd have to check 50 states and they just can't do that. So they just don't say anything. But I'm paying attention to what states are doing. And I can tell you that we are leading the nation in fossil fuel expansion. But anyway, who am I? Any other questions?
Yeah, Kelly asked, she said she joined late, but is wondering if work is being done to get the Dem candidate in the other seat in Savannah elected. Is that Alicia there? Is she from Savannah? I'm not sure.
Yeah, she's from Savannah, and that's Alicia, yeah.
If so is work being done to even though she's unopposed now, but kind of does that play out in any way if you think about the fall and the election in the fall?
I believe she is. I know of several groups that have, now when I say groups, I don't mean people like you and me. I mean like foundations and clean energy nonprofits who have donated to her candidacy. And she's been endorsed by GCV. She's being assisted in her candidacy by GCV at the least, maybe others. So there's support for her. And you know, we really need to get the primary over, and then I think we're going to really swing into action. But there is support for her, and all the candidates have been to forums. I have a video of the last forum. There's one coming up on June 12th in the Savannah area that will be recorded, and then we'll have a new one because Alicia, it's actually, I'm saying it wrong. It's not Alicia, it's Alicia or Alicia. She didn't attend the one in Atlanta, but she will be at the one in coastal Georgia, and that'll be a chance for you to see her.
Well, Alicia, she was on the one that was organized by Representative Miller and the Democratic House Caucus. So she was participating in that.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Marguerite asked a question about which polling locations do you think will need most oversight? I'm not exactly sure the context for it. I think she might actually be driving. I've seen her hopping on and off here, but does that mean something to you, Patty?
I mean, I know there are problems with Republicans disenfranchising voters, either through long lines, broken machines, not enough machines. But you know, of course, voter cleaning the list of voters. But that's outside of my lane. I don't really engage on that. There's plenty of people that are engaging on that, but that's not me.
Do you have any sense of how common it is? I love what you said actually about why we don't get good reporting ranking us relatively, because I think all these things are so opaque that it requires relative comparison to get outraged. So I love the way you're saying Georgia's top 5 in this, we're number 1 in this. I think that really gets the attention. And something I was wondering about in hearing you talk through it is, how common is it to have that grift slide you have of how common is it to allow companies or people who do business with Georgia Power, like a utility or the commission, to donate to the commission? Is that those laws you're asking for? Are those common practice in a lot of states?
Yeah, I went down a rat hole for this, trying to get that answer. And I used to work in energy, so I have a lot of energy colleagues. So I reached out to probably 3 or 4 that I thought would know this answer. And unfortunately, they don't, because it is unusual for commissioners to be elected. So in those states, there are not campaign contributions because there's no campaign, they're appointed. So that's number 1. So the set of states is only 10, not 50. Of those 10, you know, they didn't know the answer. You'd have to know someone that really understands that state closely. And I don't know, you know, I'm not that well connected that I could know someone in the South Dakota Public Utility Commission. But now that you've raised the question, now I'm curious again, and I have some help that I didn't have when I first approached this. So maybe we can look into the 10, but I don't have the answer. But in terms of context, this is where that number 1 in the country for most profits per this one. This was an attempt to get context, like, because last year Georgia Power made $2.5 billion, and I showed you the headline where Shay Schrader said it was staggering 2. Well, what does that mean? I don't know. So that's when I made this effort and put it in context. And of course, it's a horror show. But I agree with your question about the grift. That actually is a question legislators have asked when I've shown them this picture. And they're like, well, you know, what do other states do? I assume this is not happening. How are they handling it? And I'm like, I got to go get an answer to this, but I couldn't. But I'm going to revisit it. It needs an answer, and there is an answer.
I think that connects well to a question Grace had earlier, which was just about kind of your partners in amplifying some of this. And so the Center for Civic Innovation was mentioned. You referenced Canopy articles. I think Southern Environmental Law Center was asked about. And I am curious, I know, Sierra Club, like, are there national, because this is such a unique thing and we're about to get New York Times attention, are there any regional or national sources that you think could help you do some of this research, like looking into this at a more 50 state level?
I don't know about the research. I think I'm better connected than they are because of my energy background. So I can just pick up the phone and call people that know these answers. Unlike that FERC data, Sierra Club would not have been able to get that FERC data. And a lot of these national nonprofits are not working at the state commission level. I actually used to run the Georgia chapter of the Sierra Club. I ran it for 5 years in the actually 2005 to 2009. I was the state director of the Georgia chapter of the Sierra Club. I know what the national chapter does. The National Sierra Club does. One of the reasons I left was because the state Georgia chapter does not work at the Public Service Commission. They will intervene, which means they'll hire a lawyer, they'll hire consultants, they'll examine Georgia Power's IRP, the Integrated Resource Plan, and then they'll have consultants write a response to it. But that's not what I'm after. I'm after shame, exposure, awareness, electoral defeat. And the Sierra Club does not engage on that in Georgia and in most states. So
I think
I know you're talking generally, but
I think the Sierra Club has endorsed Blackman.
Yeah, a lot of them have. I mean, Daniel Blackman has been endorsed by GCV too. That's just, they don't know Peter Hubbard and they don't know Robert Jones, whereas I know both of them because I've been meeting with them for a year and I've been watching Peter and working with him for 5 years. But they only know Daniel Blackman, so.
One of the sources that covers this well is The Current, and they have a partnership with ProPublica.
Yeah.
So a lot of this detailed information is on their electronic website. I know you showed something from them.
Yeah, they do good work.
It's a great nonprofit to follow on a variety of statewide political issues.
Yeah.
I just dropped the link for that in the chat. My last question, and then I see one more just popped in, is Patty, that we've talked in this group about, we don't have a exact strategy for it yet, but there are those of us that are interested in trying to reach out to conservative or more red parts of the state, maybe our own family members in the state. I think it can be easy in these circles to defeat a straw man, but let's just say that somebody doesn't buy the grift and corrupt, and if somebody just says they're all corrupt. What would be the strongest argument in favor of this higher return on equity? What would be the strongest argument we might encounter from their perspective about why Georgia has a higher return on equity than other utilities?
Well, it's a little complicated. I haven't figured out all the messaging. I would just say that the return on, you have to explain what that is. And for this group, I use that term, but for groups not civically engaged, I would say their measure of profits, because that's what it is. Their measure, the way they are.
But what would a supporter of, what would a apologist or defender of that higher return on equity, what could they say that would actually, because there's something there. There's something.
Yeah, they could say that it delivers a lot of profits for Georgia Power and it helps their stock price. And there's a lot of people, and Georgia Power employs a lot of people. We want a strong utility with a strong, Southern Company stock price. It's how they make money. They deserve to make money. They keep the lights on. They do a good job. That's what the commissioners say.
Got it. We had another, I think that's for Senator Orrock, that just came in. Does GBPI work in energy space?
I don't think so. That's a good question. I've been trying to get the AARP lady that I know to get engaged. I should reach out to GPBI. That's a good question. I don't think so though, but it doesn't mean I can't talk them into it.
Yeah, this would be a good time for them to get into that.
Sure would. Absolutely would. I'm going to write that down as soon as we hang up.
So if you have friends that live out there in the Republican red areas of the state, you might be encouraging them to vote for an alternative, which you
Yeah.
have a chance to do on this ballot.
Yeah, what I like to say to Republicans, and I have quite a few Republican allies on this, you know, the ones I told you we met at the legislature, ones outside of the legislature. Nobody likes to be ripped off, and they're ripping off everybody. So if they just know, if they just see of course they're paying bills too, and utility bills are a kitchen table issue. They're paying too much. We're all paying too much, so that Georgia Power can deliver huge profits to out-of-state institutional investors in Southern Company. The majority of Southern Company stock owners are institutional investors out of state. That doesn't benefit anybody in Georgia. Why are we transferring the wealth of the working people of Georgia to Georgia Southern Company's executive suite? Those are the arguments that I've used to, you know, raise awareness of conservatives about what's happening.
Patty, we had a request to get the copy of these slides. Would you be okay with
Sure.
after the meeting sending that to the Paul, Jacob, and me, and then we can get that out to the whole group in a follow-up?
Yeah, I'll be glad to.
And then a request to just, could you go back to the graphic on the profit per customer?
Yes, that's back here. There we are. And by the way, I have another slide like this that captures the 10 years. I think I said this says 2024 in the headline. I have another one that's from 2013 or 2011 to 2024. Same thing.
And just to make sure I'm reading that right, that is the y-axis there is dollar amount, so $1,100.
Yes, that's a dollar amount. Thank you for asking that question. I'll fix that.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an outrage.
Any last questions before we wrap up? Lots of people, if you're not seeing the chat, Patty, lots of people are saying this has been really helpful. Thank you so much.
Oh, good.
You're as good as a thing as it can be to spread outrage.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I'm sorry.
You're doing that, and I think it is what we need in this moment.
Yeah, I mean, you got to know. And I've been living in this world for 5 years, and I'm shocked all the time, including the rate freeze. That really, I did not see that coming. But my hope is in these elections, and then our friendly legislators, I think, give me hope. The ones that have dropped these bills for us. And I just got a text from a friendly senator, Republican senator, a couple days ago saying, Commissioner Echols is deleting criticism off his Facebook page, which this person knows is against the law because Echols blocked me because I'm a relentless criticism online on X and Facebook, and he blocked me, and I sued him because it's against the law for a political representative to block critics if they use their social media for their work. And I sued him and I won. He had to unblock me and pay my lawyer fees. So that is, we have many friendly legislators is my point. We'll get this solved.
Yeah, people in the chat are just, you're amazing. Thank you for being there for all of us. I want to echo that wholeheartedly. And I think to the point of outrage, I think a lot of people are experiencing outrage looking at their power bills, but they don't realize there's actually a solution. And I hope that our group can be part of amplifying that message that there is a solution. And whether someone's motivated by clean energy and climate change or not, I think we got to keep the tent wide, and we should be able to get everyone in this, because it means lower power bills.
I couldn't say it better. That's right.
Patty, if you pulled a Republican ballot, you would still have on there the city elections that we are voting on that are nonpartisan. So it would be on the same ballot. So you vote in city elections, and you could pull a Republican ballot on this issue.
Yes, that's right. All right, Jill, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. I really enjoyed it. I love to have groups that care about these things. So thank you. And we will win this battle. This is not over.
Thanks, Patty. Thanks, everybody.
Yes, thanks. Glad to hear you say that.
One thing, Paul, this ballot that we're voting on right now
for the primary only has PSC on it. There's nothing else on the ballot.
That's correct.
Yeah. So
This is a PSC primary election only,
Right,
the PSC.
right, right. So what you said about pulling it, there's a Democrat or Republican ballot.
It's both a Republican and a Democratic primary to run for the PSC.
It's only for PSC, so there's no city involved in this election.
Oh, you're probably right. Thank you for correcting me on that.
I think because I asked the poll worker I saw
Yeah.
the other day in the park. So
maybe Paul wasn't clear, but I think he meant right now you could pull the Republican ballot. And then when actually it comes to the general election, it's going to be the municipal elections with this PSC together.
Right.
So maybe you weren't clear with that.
Okay.
Well, thanks again, everyone. I'll go ahead and close out the meeting now, and we'll get a follow-up email with recording of this event and link to sign up for the newsletter. I think it'd be great if we all signed up on the newsletter and kept this conversation going within our group.
Thanks, Patty.
Thanks, everyone. Everybody.
All right.
Thank you.